higher education here in the United States and were clearly understanding the American way of doing business. They were in many ways Americanized, but simultaneously they knew the Latin culture, they knew how to communicate in Spanish, and they were the ideal executives for these large American corporations to go to Latin America. Therefore, the so-called commercial business imperialism of the United States towards Latin America in many instances was headed by young professional Cubans who were sent as executives of those companies. I lived at that time, I lived for many years in Panama, in Costa Rica, and Mexico. And the interesting thing is that when you would go to receptions or meetings of the American Chamber of Commerce, that was full of Cubans. Because those, the American executives, in fact, were Cuban Americans who had been sent by these corporations to work in Latin America. Now, politically, there is also a significant effect. For example, the city of Miami, although it still has, or Miami-Dade County, it still has a majority of the Democratic Party. I don't know if you are aware that the great majority of the Cubans are affiliated as Republicans. The Cuban group is the most conservative or the most Republican of all the Latin American groups represented in the United States. You know how hard is to win a national election. You know how hard is to win the state of Florida. Just imagine if the Republican Party wouldn't count with that particular electoral block of Cubans who live in Miami. Many of the Republican presidents that we have had in the United States, and just by having one president from one party or the other, that changes history dramatically. Therefore, I think that you see right there a tremendous political secondary effect that sometimes people don't properly ponder. But we see it up to this minute. And when you think about how many immigrants have been able to reach the Senate of the United States of America, there are only 100 senators for the whole country. And Mel Martinez, who is Pedro Pan, represented the state of Florida until recently. Therefore, just imagine the political influence or the political impact that exodus is having, even to the present. Another thing that I wanted to comment is the Cuban Revolution is very interesting. It's like politically, the Cuban government has treated the island as a pressure cooker. Every time that it's almost ready to explode, they allow a wave of immigrants to leave to maintain internal rest. Therefore, in some way, you are not going to believe that the Cuban government didn't know, that a totalitarian regime didn't know that 14,000 kids were leaving the island in this secret way. That was no secret. Everybody knew. It was massive. In every single street, you had a family sending somebody out. Why did they allow it? You know, you send the children out. Now the parents are desperate about the children. Now the parents go out. Then now the worry is different. Then that helps to consolidate the revolution. The same thing with Camarioca, and the same thing with the freedom flights, and the same thing with Mariel. And every time that the internal pressure is terrible, you just let them go, because in that way you reduce the active internal opposition. But the Cuban government also had an international agenda. And by the way, sometimes we get astonished to see that up to some degree might be working now in some Latin American countries. But since the early 60s, several Latin American countries were targeted for Marxist revolution. One of them was Venezuela, and another one, to give you an example, was Guatemala. But the fact that all these Cubans went to exile And the fact that many of them were actually moving to Latin America in that kind of business executive positions that I mentioned, and created very prosperous colonies of Cubans in all these countries, also had a political effect in Latin America. Sometimes people are naive, people don't realize what is going on. Marxists are very sneaky in their strategies, and in many instances, these Cubans all around Latin America were a word letting the locals and the local governments know about the involved risks. Therefore, I believe that this exodus in many ways has as another secondary effect the stoppage of the plans that the Cuban Revolution had to extend all across Latin America. Then maybe the pressure cooker model helped to maintain Cuba under the regime, but giving that release, letting all these people go, actually affected their agenda of expansion outside of Cuba. And I think that is a very important secondary effect too. Now, you know that Willie Chirino, or I don't know if you know that Willie Chirino is one of the Pedro Pans, and you know what is the cultural effect that he has had here in Miami or in all Latin America or Spanish-speaking countries. You know the effect that Dr. Eduardo Padron has had on education in general and education of Hispanics. This college was founded in 1960, and now it has, 50 years later, has 170,000 students. Dr. Padron was just selected last Tuesday by President Obama to direct the Hispanic education agenda for the whole country, and he is a Pedro Pan. And in every corner that you go, in business, in religion, in politics, in art and culture, you always find Pedro Pans. Those 14,000 kids in general became very, very successful. I don't know, sometimes you say that when your book of life is written with variety of experiences, you become a better person. I wish that I had not been a victim of the Cuban Revolution, but now looking in perspective, I know that the experience enriched my life. And I think that in many instances, the difficult experience that these children had make them stronger, make them better, and that's why they are so productive, and they have become leaders in all the areas in which they participate. Something interesting about them, and I don't know what kind of relationship some of you might have with some of these Pedro Pan, but there is an aura of melancholy or nostalgia. They are different. You know, when you get to know them, you know that in some ways they are different, that something affected their lives, that there are scars there, that some, and they tend to be emotional. Now this openness and this discussion about Pedro Pan that has started heavily this year, at their request and being promoted by them, is relatively new. Many of you, when he asked how many of you know about this, very few people knew, because the 14,000 have been generally silent about this. Now they are writing books, now they are talking about their experiences. Now I think that they feel probably psychologically healed, and they don't want this experience to be forgotten, especially because, as I said, the secondary effects or the global implications of this emigration in many aspects have been significant, have been tremendous. That's basically let me comment that talking about that influence of American politics in Latin America, Simón Ferro, for example, was the ambassador of the United States in Panama, and Otto Reich was the ambassador to Venezuela, and he was also Assistant Secretary of State for the Western Hemisphere. Therefore, you see that presence all the time from this group of people.
Thank you so much, Dr. Montoya. Don't worry, guys, we're gonna let you out here in time. We know you have a class at noon, but if some of you guys wanna ask some questions to our panelists, we have 2 mics set, one on each side of the room. All right, so we're gonna hear from Dr. Munoz. Maybe if you get a little closer. Give it a try now.
I just want to tell the audience that Miami-Dade College is the largest college in the country. And you already know about Dr. Rolando Padron. But right below Dr. Padron in importance is the position of the provost. And Dr. Montoya, and I've been here since 1976, he might be the best provost we ever had. So when you see him walking in the street, just shake his hand. So he's fighting hard to protect the quality of our programs and enhance them. Thank you, Dr. Montoya, for coming.
So we'll have a brave soul, or 2 or 3. I want to ask a question. Come on, how about somebody from Dr. Vazquez's class?
Someone's thinking, let me add a comment to what Dr. Montoya, one of the many very interesting points that Dr. Montoya raised about the implications, because the experience of Pedro Pan and the experience of Cuba with Marxism and communism also made the United States more resilient to oppose these regimes in the Dominican Republic, in Central America during the latter part of the 70s and early 80s, and also by the same token, an increase in immigration and the diasporic communities, as Dr. Montoya pointed out, from the Dominican Republic, from Central America, and successful opposition to communist strongholds in all of Latin America is part of the secondary implications of the larger aspect of this struggle of the Cold War during the latter part of the 20th century.
Thank you. We have a student over here. Can you tell us your name?
My name is Rachel, and I'm a political science major. And the question is directed toward either one of you. I mean, I thought it was interesting how you made the analogy that of the pressure cooker. Do you believe that in this time there might be another one of those mass exodus or something of that sort could occur? Or do you think that it's just that the time just passed?
Everything is possible. The only difference that I would observe at this time is that the United States is a lot more knowledgeable about those strategies and probably better prepared to stop it. And there are sometimes comments that when Fidel and his brother would pass, and some level of anarchy may take place at the island, that many people would try to escape and take advantage. Even though now there will be more hope in the long run, you know how many years it's going to take for that economy and that society to recover, then many people probably would try to take advantage of the anarchy to come massively to the United States as in prior exodus. What I imagine is that the federal government of the United States and the Navy and the Coast Guard and others would be readier not to allow something like that to happen. But there are plans at the level of the city of Miami, the level of Miami-Dade County, and even the level of the federal government to call for a potential massive immigration if such a level of anarchy would ever take place in Cuba. Actually, some people throw the theories that in many instances the government of the United States feels more comfortable with the current regime in Cuba, because while it is in there, then there is not this possibility of this type of anarchy or this massive exodus to the United States. I don't support that theory, but there are people who actually believe that.
And there are always conspiracy theories out there. But I concur with Dr. Montoya on this. I think that knowing friends and neighbors who work for the county and work for for the state that, that we do have better planning and management processes in place. Of course, anything can happen in a situation, and one never knows what size and scope it might be, but I agree that the past experience have taught us how to at least have a plan and be prepared, because as he pointed out, anything could happen there. And this pressure cooker could be released by the government at any point when they feel it appropriate for them.
Great, thanks. We have one more question, and give us your name and your major as well. Oh, no, you can say that. I mean.
We have time for 2 questions. Right? Ladies first, you don't mind?
Okay. My name is Kenya and my major is English. But I wanted to ask you, since you say that this was such a revolutionary movement or whatever, what do you think was the biggest impact, positively or negative that this created in our society today? Because 14,000 kids in our society now, that is the immigration rates are really high. Jobs, everything like that, it impacts. So what do you think is the positive or negative impact of that?
I think that one thing that I have found in my reading and speaking, just a couple of experiences of individuals, is something that Dr. Montoya mentioned earlier. And we still don't know the scope of this because it's been sort of on the background for so long. But now that many of the Pedro Pan are speaking about this experience, I think it's going to be interesting to see more the psychological impact that this has had on them, the experience, because we all of us in this room are probably familiar in some form or another with immigration, whether it's a second generation or third generation. But when the immigration and transplanting people from one place to another is always difficult. Even in the best case scenario, I think that the experience of the Pedro Pan, when we know more about their transition, is going to help us to understand better their plight, their what they went through. And I think it's important, as Dr. Montoya pointed out, that they are the ones that are sort of leading this process for us to know more about this. And I think that's going to be important for us to know.
I think that the psychological suffering of the families during the process is the most negative element. But now in the long run, when you analyze the whole history, most of the effects tend to be positive, because they are successful people, and I think that they contributed to create the type of society that we have in Miami, the big multicultural, sustainable city that we have. With all the institutions that we have here, including this college, I think that they were protagonists in this process of development of our community. And this community connects so much with Latin America that you can see also benefits for the rest of the Latin American nations. Therefore, economically, politically, culturally, religiously, the effects have been very positive. The psychological suffering is what really hurts, and still you notice when they have to recollect the times, that's hard for most of them.
Thank you. I have one more question here.
Yes.
Your name and your major?
My name is is it on? Can you hear me? Sure. My name is Sterling Osborne. I'm an English major. I noticed that a lot of the effects that you've been talking about have to do more with America and Latin America. How has this situation, this event, affected society more globally? How has it affected Europe or Africa or Asia? Other parts of the world.
Victor probably can provide more details. I probably refer mostly to effects here in the United States and Latin America, because that's where we are physically located. But as he presented earlier, the Pedro Pan operation can be analyzed within the context of the Cold War. And I would say that the presence of those exiles here in Miami, and then later the transfer in many instances to Latin America, made it a lot harder for the Soviet Union and their satellites to penetrate in our hemisphere, because that was the idea since day one from the Soviets. They wanted more influence on this hemisphere, and I would say that Pedro Pan operation in particular and the whole exile experience, the Cuban diaspora, was a factor that contributed to make the position of the United States stronger in the fight against the Soviet Union. Then in that sense, it helped. Now what is incredible is that Eastern Europe got liberated from communism, and they were closer. Actually, the Soviet Union ended the regime. And who would say that the nation that is located 90 miles of the United States, in the 80s, if you would have asked which country will go out of communism first, is Germany or Cuba, everybody would have told you, of course, Cuba is. Germany will never be out of communism. And you see, liberation took place in the whole European continent, and we still have it at touristic distance from Key West.
Great. Do we have time for one last question, and then we'll be on our way? Give us some patience, guys. Go ahead. Say it out loud. We can hear you from here.
Say that and repeat it.
Environmental science, and I wanted to say that this has been a great opportunity, like for Cubans, like me in particular. I was born in 1989, like 30 years after Fidel came to power, and my generation, and including me, we don't know anything about any of this. Like this part of the history of Cuba is being lost, and you know, it's been really interesting, and people do want to know, and I think it will be great to promote this kind of debates, so people can get a better approach to the history of Cuba.
Thank you so much. That was the best solution we could ever. Thank you so much, and thank you all for being here from. Thank you.